The FNRad Snowboard Podcast is presented by Vans. Season 8 of FNRad is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, Anon Optics, the Boardroom Snowboard Shop, Achenbach Realestate.com, and Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC. Season 8's final guest, Jess Camira, has been busy giving away $40,000 at the Uninvited Invitational last weekend, and I've run into some technical difficulties with the edit of her episode, so I'm working on it and hope to have it ready for next Wednesday. In the meantime, here's a bonus episode. My daughter Emma graduated from the Environmental Science program at the University of British Columbia and has taken a job with GHG Accounting Services, a company that provides specialized carbon and sustainability consulting and greenhouse gas accounting services to corporations, local government agencies, and not-for-profit organizations. My daughter Emma thought it would be good to link me up with her boss and CEO of GHG, Svend Andersen, for a conversation about what we can do as individuals, businesses, and communities about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I know it's not a snowboarding conversation, but it was super fun, and there's some great information in this bonus episode with Svend Andersen. When you tell people you do environmental work, one of the first things they do is they come at you personally, right? Like, okay, what kind of car do you drive? Do you bike to work?
Yeah,
do you?
yes.
So you come under the scrutiny, which, you know, you could have just cooked a deal with a huge corporation that saves thousands of tons of carbon, and they're going, but you had a hamburger, so
I'm a bad person.
Yeah, how could you be a good person? So have you any experience with that?
Oh, very much so. I have a lot of experiences like this, and a lot of people that are active have the experience as well. And I'm glad that you actually point to that, because it frustrates the hell out of people. That there's probably two important things that's important to me to distinguish from the things that you just shared.
Yeah.
One is that we don't describe our work as being environmental.
Okay.
It is climate work or related to the climate crisis. And the fact that a lot of people put these things in the same basket, I think, is not good for neither for the environment or for the climate.
Good. Yeah.
And
cool.
so it's very important to distinguish between these two. I do come from a environmental background a long time ago when I was at school.
Yes.
But I realized that actually it's very important to be effective in anything we do on the climate front, to do really this. And the example that I usually like to give is the compost in your backyard.
Sure.
So you think like, hey, I don't like to eat everything of the apple, which is fine. Nobody should force you to.
Right.
And so there's still some bits left. And so what do you do with it? And I would say, well, sure, you think from an environmental point of view, if you have a garden, having a compost, probably a good idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you look from a climate perspective to this, you're creating methane in that compost, which is a very potent impactor of climate change. Actually much more potent than CO2.
Right.
So from a climate perspective, it's not a good idea. So you go like, oops, how do these things not work together? I would wish they are the same, but unfortunately they are not. Sure, the climate change aspect will have a detrimental impact on the environment. So there is some relationships. And there's also some things you can do for environmental things, like protecting an ecosystem, like a bog or a forest, whatever, that has a positive climate impact, but not automatically these things are not the same. And just this misunderstanding is already important to distinguish. The other one is the personal aspect that you mentioned about, like, hey, I just reduced 1,000 tons of carbon, but I'm not allowed to eat some junk food. I love that. That's really a good picture, because that's the reality. We have to ask ourselves, where does it come from, that attitude? And it actually comes from Vancouver.
Wow, come on, really?
Yes, like 1971. Unfortunately, I don't have the names, but some academics in UBC developed this concept of this ecological footprint.
Yes.
Not the carbon footprint, but the ecological footprint.
I've heard that, yeah.
And that made in Vancouver idea.
No way. That's amazing.
And they had the best intentions. Obviously,
course.
these people, everybody who's doing something usually always has good intentions.
Yeah.
But the unintended consequence of that is that you have this concept of guilt or sin or whatever, that you were doing something wrong
Yes.
when their intent was to promote something positive.
Right.
But with us humans, unfortunately, it turned the flip side of that you are doing something wrong was the emphasis of this. While there are people who developed this originally said, hey, why did you take responsibility, learn what your responsibilities are, and you become a responsible actor, which in theory is a good idea. But what in reality happened is that people developed this kind of like environmental sinners almost concept.
Yes.
And as soon as you talk about it, it's like, oh, you're doing the wrong thing, or you are not a true believer. And then very quickly, it reminds you, if you think about, sounds very much like religion. And that usually didn't go very well in our history when these kind of concepts were applied to our human behavior.
Right.
And so maybe we should have a different way of thinking about this. And that is how we orient our work. We don't tell, for example, people what to do.
Right.
What we do is we are orienting ourselves on what a agreed and credible standard has prescribed, and then we measure somebody against it.
Right.
And then you can do the same thing about your own behavior. If you say, okay, well, if I want to do something about the environment, or if I want to do something about the climate, then I have to ask myself, okay, what's the problem? The problem is greenhouse gases. That's the problem. That's what changes the climate. So therefore, if I do want to do something about it, I should reduce as much as I can, or reduce where it counts the most.
Nice.
And everybody can make their own choice about this. Like, I don't judge that.
Right.
So if you want to make as much changes in your personal life, things you can do, sure. But also, if you want to think about where do I have the most impact, then I have to think about, okay, how many greenhouse gases are actually emitted somewhere.
Right.
And then you go like, wow, okay, that needs to be calculated. And then you go, wow, okay, who does this? Greenhouse gas accounting. Wow, this is actually what you do. Wow, cool. That's actually, maybe it is important. It sounds boring if you have that word just as like, hey, you're a greenhouse gas accountant. What?
Right.
Does it have anything to do with saving the planet? And people go like, no. Somehow you think I'm doing the business or the financial accounting for greenhouses, but I'm
right.
That's not what we're doing.
Right, because even my friend is guilty. I said I'm going to be interviewing you, and he said, so he boiled it down to, so he sells carbon credits so that people can do bad shit. And I go, oh, no, that's not what we're talking about here. But I could understand how people have a cynical outlook on, you're getting an electric car. Well, the batteries were made in a cobalt factory with child labor. And it's like, okay, well, why? But now I don't have a car that's emitting greenhouse gases. Like, let's talk about that. That was the 100% driver behind me buying the car, not like, now, okay, so now what do I have to do to offset the awful thing about cobalt? Well, we're putting pressure on the companies to use cobalt that wasn't mined
responsibly, if that's possible, in quotation marks.
Exactly, if it's possible, right.
I think what drives this, and again, I have to be careful with stating this, it is, in my personal view, deliberate.
Okay.
And then again, people will go like, woo, like conspiracy, warning, flags, trigger warning. I'm going, no, listen, please listen, like what I want to mean by this.
Yes.
There was an event also in 1971, interesting enough, at the same time where somebody in UBC was developing this concept of the ecological footprint and then developed later into the carbon footprint.
Yep.
But not by scientists, by a marketing company paid by BP.
Ooh.
They use that concept. But at the same time, in California, the government in California wanted to have some solution to plastic waste.
Right. I know this story. I know this one. I'd like to hear it. This is great.
Or my version of it, how I present it. Yes.
Yes.
And so the beverage industry and basically every big brand that you know today in the US came together and formed an association like something American association or something
Of
with the word
course.
America inside.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
very patriotic. And they commissioned also a marketing company to create a clip.
Yep.
And usually today known as the Crying Indian,
Crying Indian, right.
where to the people who don't know it, is basically somebody who's like on a canoe, going to the shore, stepping up, going an embankment up, standing beside a street, and then somebody, you don't see it out the off, throws their waist in front of his feet, and you just see the tear in his eyes.
Yes.
Hence the word Crying Indian.
Yes.
I mean, and this is what it's referred to, even though it's inappropriate to
Correct.
use that term,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
that's what everybody knows it for.
Yep.
And then the slogan is like,
Put litter in its place, I think is what.
no, it's not.
something along that
No, it's not.
lines.
It's like protecting the environment is everybody's own business or something.
Yes.
So that to drive it to the individual.
Right.
So the individual decides if they throw it away or put it in a bin.
Right.
That's usually the argument that they use. However, the idea of the government, of course, was to have producers' responsibility and have like a recycling program.
They were actually talking about, before recycling even, they were talking about we need to end single-use containers. Like, so you got to go to glass, you have to go to something that doesn't require so much, that if you throw it in the garbage, you just wasted all that energy. And even recycling takes, if it's not an aluminum can, I think all plastics are very low on, it takes so much energy to recycle them. It's almost like getting brand new plastic anyways.
No, yeah, if you do it right, you can do it right, but it's tricky, yes.
Yeah.
But this is our business, for example, to calculate these things.
Absolutely. Cool.
That's
cool.
what we do in our daily life.
That's
but
really
back
cool.
to this clip and that
Yes.
why I made the claim that this is deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
So it was deliberate marketing campaign to put the idea in everybody's head, okay, I'm responsible.
Yes.
To protect the environment. And
Right.
have because you have to think about what's the opposite, have no responsibility on the producer's side.
Right.
That's exactly what they want to
Right.
achieve. Like,
Right.
no, it's off our hands, everybody
Yeah.
decides. But when in fact, the physical and practical reality is, if there is no recycling center, you cannot recycle. It's just like impossible. You as an individual person, you cannot decide to have a recycling program.
Right.
It needs to be on a community scale. There
Yep.
needs to be common good.
Yes.
And of course, companies are always against common good. And we as a people, we recognize that common good is something very, very precious and valuable. And the only elected officials are usually the ones that can create that. We can come together as a society and do that too, of course.
Right.
But it's together. It's not a single person.
Absolutely.
We have to collaborate to do something like this.
Right.
And of course, you need money.
Yep.
And the concept of that time, and still today, that if you produce a single-use plastic, that you do have to pay your share as a producer to finance the recycling system. And of course, the industry's tried everything to prevent this.
Of course.
And they were quite successful. So people still think today, hey, it's up to me to the environment. You have to, wait a minute, that's too much pressure. Yeah, you're not responsible if this building easily burns or something.
Right.
I couldn't make you personally responsible if you go like, whoa, that's a burden. Like, it's scary. Like, I'm responsible for it? Are you crazy? Like, why should I be responsible? It's
Right.
outside of my power.
Right.
But the same is true for the environment. Why should you carry the world on your shoulders?
Yeah, that's really, really a good way of putting it.
It's
right
unfair.
there. Yeah.
We're in this together. We need to collaborate. And you cannot just say, oh, you're an individual environmental sinner.
Right.
That's also not a very nice way of dealing with people.
Right. That's a
way.
very corporate way of pushing it
Yes.
downstream to make everybody feel
Yes.
bad and still buy stuff. So when you feel bad, you buy stuff.
Exactly,
Right?
yes.
Try and feel better.
Now you know how well it works.
It works perfectly, right? So if there was at that time some push in government to legislate against single-use containers, plastic films, like we'd live in a different planet right now.
Yeah, although I would be a bit careful about forbidding things
Right.
and rather prescribing things.
Right.
Because like on the scale of total corporate social Darwinism
Yep.
and total regulations,
Yep.
I would like to be somewhere in the middle, ideally.
Cool.
Because not everybody will agree that this is the right thing, and not everybody will agree this is the right thing.
Right.
So maybe if we go for some middle ground, we have a lot of people, the best compromise if everybody is a little bit unhappy. You know that saying?
No, I don't, but I like it.
So that's usually what we get. Otherwise, you have people that are really happy and are really pissed off.
Right.
And that's not good for common good and for society.
Yeah, Emma's grown up in co-ops, housing co-ops. And because it's a small democracy, you can really see the challenges of democracy, that it is really intense. It's very labor intensive to get everybody on the same page about everything.
Yeah.
It's very, transparent when the person joins the maintenance committee because they've got a problem with their suite. Now all of a sudden the maintenance committee is focused on the problem of their suite. You're kind of going, okay, well, 20 people, if democracy is that difficult to not have people game the system.
Yes.
Then scale up to a city, it's got to be impossible. And scale up to the world, it's almost crazy.
I'm an optimist. I'm saying I wouldn't use the word impossible.
Sure.
There are smarter ways about doing this. At least I think so.
Yeah.
And those are about clever rules.
Cool.
Things are prescriptive, and it says like,
yes,
this should be principles that we follow.
Absolutely.
Then you don't have to make that decision each time you have a decision.
Right.
To say, we have these rules that we agree upon.
Yes.
And then it's much easier to make decisions based on these rules each time you have to decide who's responsible for this bag of garbage.
Right. I've been reading a lot of indigenous knowledge the last year.
Okay.
I just Robin Kimmerer Wall did a book called Braiding Sweetgrass and a series of books with a bunch of authors on just like, hey, we've been kind of telling you guys this for like the 250 years you've been here.
Probably, but I mean, they have telling each other a bit longer.
Yeah, tens of thousands of years, right. But the premise that I really like is that when we write a human law, in our society, it's not a law, really. It's a rule,
yes.
Right? Like, because the law on marijuana, for example, it was completely illegal. There was no use in humans. Yeah. And we could change that law. But real laws are immutable. Laws of nature, like if you fish all the fish out of a lake, the lake is, dead.
Yeah.
And there's downstream consequences.
Yeah.
So I think we already have the practical laws. Like, humans have been around on the planet long enough to know better. But it's like,
think so.
If we had those laws in place, and I'll go off on a crazy tangent here, but like English as a language is very violent towards non-human entities, forests, trees, plants, animals.
Yeah.
They're all it's, and they're not human. Who is this, right? Like, what is that tree? Oh, it's an elm tree. Not who is that tree. So indigenous languages are animistic, like who is that bay? Right now, that water is being a bay. It's a different way to speak. And I think if we had some of that in our lexicon, we're stuck sometimes in making laws in the languages that are dominant right now.
Okay.
And in non-animistic cultures where we see our other earth relatives as resources for human exploitation, like the Christian, God gave us dominion over everything. It's really hard to see where a solution will come in that, hey, these are our things. This is our coal. This is our gas. This is what are you talking about? The rights of the forest people. But the people are passing laws around the world where rivers have rights, where forests have rights. I think that's
an interesting
where
thought.
we're starting.
I would think about it slightly differently.
Cool.
Usually when I explain this about this concept of rules rather than forbidding or principles, I put it like to sports, or you play a game. If you play a board game, the idea is that we agree, okay, there are rules.
Yes.
And sure, you can cheat, but then what's the whole point then? Because you can just take a gun and shoot the person and you win, so to speak. You don't need to bother with even doing anything.
Yeah,
so the interesting part is to say, okay, we accept this set of rules and we try to play within them.
Yes.
And the same we do in sports and hockey or whatever. That's the idea. And the same concept applies also to freedom, because personal freedom, I think, plays a role when we talk about challenging topics as climate change and climate crisis, because it comes to these things. You're not allowed to eat junk food, or you're not allowed to eat even meat, or you're not allowed to fly. So we are challenged on this topic with the topic of, okay, wait a minute, how does it actually, our society work? Which makes this topic of climate change also so vicious, actually, I want to say, that people get really agitated about it, because people say like, whoa, don't talk to me about climate change because it will impede my freedom to decide what kind of car I want to use.
Right.
So I think it's actually not a tangent at all that we talk about this concept of freedom and political systems.
Yeah.
Because I think they are touched by this really, really important topic.
Cool.
And the solution, or no, not solution, that's not what I want to say. The thought that I have about this, I'm going to be very careful, because I accept that there are different solutions. So the
Absolutely. Cool.
Is to have this concept. Okay, we agree on probably, if we have commonly accepted rules or principles, that's probably the best way of understanding this. But then, of course, you have an individual view where you say like, well, I would like to do whatever I can because then I feel free.
Right.
And these things are competing concepts, because if I do whatever I want, I impede you in your freedom to do whatever you want. Okay. If I think like this whole room is mine, and you go like, wait a minute, I don't think so. Like, where was the room for me? Right. I immediately impede on your rights and regulations. So unfortunately, I'm not alone in this world. So on the idea of, well, we agree that, I don't know, that everything is split in half, for example.
Sure.
Then automatically you own half of the room, and you decide, whatever room we go to, this rule will always help us. We don't have to fight each time.
Right.
You know, and so
I got you.
And so absolute freedom doesn't exist, even though everybody will wish for this.
Sure.
And sure, if we're, I don't know, if we're having a beer, whatever, we can joke about it. But if it's about serious matters, unfortunately, I think we need to think about this in a respectful way and say, okay, well, in order for all of us to be room there, probably this concept of having agreed principles is probably the best. Yes. It doesn't achieve absolute freedom. It doesn't mean I can buy whatever car I can, even though I would like to have everybody being allowed to do this.
Right.
I know we are not going to achieve anything together if we do this.
Right.
And then becomes the question, how do we decide on these rules? Does somebody decide it based on their political ideas, their religious ideas, and we go like, not everybody has a political opinion is the same. Not everybody has the same religion. Not everybody has even religion, or whatever it is. All these bases are difficult.
Right.
So we need to agree on some other things that we have. And we do have scientific research that we agree helps us to have microphones and cameras and whatever. So
peer-reviewed.
That also brought us like nuclear weapons stuff. We go like,
Sure.
So, but at least we can use that. And that's basically what we try to do in our work, if I may come back to this. So that
I love it. I knew it was coming back because it just makes sense. Like, I kind of know from what I've gleaned from Emma that, and I hope I'm right on this, but it feels, there's a good feeling when I hear about the work you're doing, because it seems like, and I'll do a tangent here. A few years ago, I heard a cool thing about, I don't know whether it was an expo or some sort of world gathering of technology and countries. It was in Beijing, and it was either, I don't know exactly what they were showcasing, but what Denmark did was they sent over an empty tanker, so China sends the goods to Denmark, and they sent it back filled with water from the Danish harbor where the Little Mermaid is. And they invited people to come swim in it in the Beijing harbor, which is just filthy, disgusting. And they said, look, our harbor used to be this bad, but with concerted effort and proper governance, we can clean up the water, right? So people are swimming in this thing. It was that's
actually cool.
Yeah, it's super cool because it's a showcase of Denmark gets it. A lot of the European countries, especially Scandinavia, where they're fairly affluent, have a good climate record as far as taking it on and making real laws. And I was really happy to hear that Canada has passed some laws that they can really help industry clean up, right? Is that where we're operating right now?
No, yeah. So just to answer the obvious question. So, okay, if you're dealing with science and quantification methodologies to quantify how much greenhouse gases people produce, companies produce, and then people, of course, ask me then, so what should I do?
Right.
the all important question. And then you come, so if you are looking to what you do and what you can influence and what has a big influence, the simple answer is don't use fossil fuel and don't eat meat, or at least as little as possible, or both of those things.
Sure.
And you will already go a long way.
Okay.
Everything else doesn't make a lot of a difference.
A huge difference, right?
But of course, I don't want to tell anybody to not be responsible with whatever they do, with whatever resource they're dealing with. But fossil fuels and meat are probably the ones that you want to stay away because their footprint is gigantic.
Yep.
In any shape or form. And so as much as you can reduce this in any place, that's a good thing. On a bigger scale, if you're an organization, like if you're like even a school or a sports team or even a housing co-op or whatever you are, you want to do some form of greenhouse gas accounting by yourself. You can use calculators, whatever. If you're a bigger corporation, obviously you want to use a professional to do this.
Yes.
Or if you're a city, and understand where the most greenhouse gases are produced, and then you want to spend all your effort of reducing them because that's the most effective use of your resources. And on a scale of a country, and we know if you look at the inventories of countries, you can clearly see that between 75 to 85% of all emissions from all developed countries are related to energy production.
Oh, wow.
So usually there's a lot of articles out there that say, oh, did you know that, I don't know, 25% of all emissions are related to meat? And you go, no, that's not entirely true. It's energy. It's energy production in any form. So power, warmth, heat, transportation, everything is related to energy. That's where the absolute big majority of the greenhouse gases come from. And in this space, we have good solutions in Canada. I forgot to say, the greenhouse gas accounting was developed in Canada. It's a made in Canada solution.
Cool.
From the Canadian Standard Institute. They're still the subject matter governance body for the international standard of greenhouse gas accounting.
Canada. Wow.
It's all from Canada. The individual footprint comes from Canada, even though that's backfired. Greenhouse gas accounting comes out of Canada, and the best laws that you refer to,
yes,
that you can make in this space, in my view, come out of Canada, and that's an energy intensity law.
Okay.
So here, the idea originally comes from California about fuel.
Yep.
We took it up in 2013 here in BC.
Yep.
So that you have to do a life cycle analysis of your fuel before you're allowed to sell it, and has to be under a certain threshold.
Wow.
Otherwise, it's an illegal product in BC.
Oh, that's incredible.
And so that's the low carbon and renewable fuel standard. And that last year was adopted in Canada federally. So they learned from BC.
Wow.
And it was then rolled out to all of Canada. Again, we in BC.
Yeah.
We started in Canada, and the rest of the country is learning from it.
Very cool.
And that's on transportation fuels. And this is going to be also rolled out for other substances and electricity. And basically the idea behind it is very obvious. If you ask yourself, for example, like we have these nice mugs here,
yep.
if somebody figures out, ooh, they look very nice, but the color in them will seep, I don't want to spoil your experience, but seeps like maybe chemicals into our drink.
No, of course.
That will kill people.
Yeah.
And what does government usually do? They make a requirement. So if you have a color that you use on mugs, it cannot contain a certain amount of chemicals.
Totally.
Because otherwise it is toxic.
Easy to agree on that.
Yeah, it's very easy. And it's even if you take water. No? Water is regulated in the sense that there's not allowed to be a certain amount of bacteria in it because it's harmful to people.
Absolutely.
And so the same idea is applied here, saying if I use a kilowatt hour of electricity, it should not have and exceed a certain greenhouse gas intensity.
Perfect.
So we have all the tools that we need. And we in Canada realize this and are realizing it. But we're the only country in the world who's doing it.
Oh, wow. What, really?
Yes. And it has boggled my mind.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, but we should be proud of it, and we
Yeah.
should actually promote it more. That this is a made in Canada solution. That it's the best solution out there to tackle this problem.
Yeah, Canada needs to make some of those ads. I was just in one of the last episodes I was talking about when I was a kid. They put these ads in TV between shows that said, "Hey, did you know that basketball was invented in Canada?" It's like a bunch of old guys cutting a bottom of a peach basket out. They need to do one of those for this. Like, hey, we're the only country in the world that's actually putting laws into place to save this planet that we are all a part
Now,
of.
There's the difference between planet and so it's only to tackle climate change.
I'm still wrapping my head around. It makes sense what you're saying, but this is one big, huge part of the problem: taking climate action, right?
And because I wouldn't want to say that because the greenhouse gas intensity law for energy, will not save a single species.
Okay,
sure, it will if it reduces the climate change effect. It will have an indirect, also ecological, but directly, you need to do other things. You need to restore ecosystems or whatever. So you need to do much more to save the planet than does this law. But in order to have a significant impact on the greenhouse gases of every country, especially developed countries, in greenhouse gas intensity law should be the one that all the countries need. And I don't know, we should talk to everybody. I wrote a book to promote this in Germany.
Yeah.
But Germans have this weird sense that they know things better. I don't know where that comes from, but never mind.
Well, I heard that the policy changing in Europe, like Greta Thunberg, had a really huge impact, and people started to switch. Like, we need to create a green agenda, whatever it is. Like, we need and political parties started to be elected on that platform. Like, hey, we're really actually going to take action here. And most of the media, so most of the media I get is from the States, and people in the States are like, we are doing nothing. Like, we're reopening coal tailings plants. Like, we're going completely in the wrong direction here. But it's nice to hear that Canada's not doing that. We're not.
We are the most, from a policy point of view, we're the most innovative country on this planet by miles.
Wow, that's great. I feel good about that. You guys feel good about that? That feels really great.
I just don't understand why not more people are promoting it.
Yeah, that seems insane. Well, maybe we're getting back to 1971 and the agenda, right? Like, there's people that run this country that support political campaigns that don't want that being what we're known for.
But I think it's necessary. So I do appreciate what the movement of Fridays for Futures and Greta has done for the topic.
Yes.
But unfortunately, they have talked also a lot about personal behavior.
Okay.
And that was kind of like, yes, attention, fine, but you're talking about the wrong topics a little bit too much.
Yeah, we took, Emma came, I don't even know if you were in school, the climate march, do you remember? There was tens of thousands of people.
Yes.
And the crazy thing was Justin Trudeau was one of them. And we're like, but we're marching against you. You're the one who's supposed to be doing something. If you've got a whole day, you can march with us. Make some policy changes, please.
But he has.
Right. So good. Great.
So
That's good to hear.
The greenhouse gas intensity laws are under his...
That's incredible. That's great.
Under his leadership.
Keep it going.
He didn't come up with the idea, but
no.
At least under his
He endorsed it. Yes.
He at least didn't prevent it. Let's put it this way. I would be a bit careful about this.
I got you.
So I would wish he would understand what Canada is doing, and I wish he would talk about it more. But unfortunately, he doesn't understand what his government is doing on this.
That makes sense.
And he's not able to promote it the way it should be promoted.
I love it. I wish that we were on, national TV right now in front of Canada and the rest of the world.
And it's really funny if I do presentations in Germany and I explain that to them, they go like, "That cannot be." We in Germany, we need to have better ideas. Canadians cannot have better ideas than we are on the environment. This doesn't work. This is not how it is. We make better cars and we have better ideas. And I'm going like, guys, just chill. It's just the reality. Like, Germany is 10 years behind Canada.
Wow, that's incredible.
In terms of these ideas. And that's what I'm trying to do with my speaking engagements and whatever, to say, hey, there's better ideas and it's worth thinking about them. Doesn't mean we have all the answers. It doesn't mean this is the perfect solution. But I think it's a much better solution, whatever else somebody has come up with.
Yeah, cool. So where are we in the implementation of this?
So the fuel standard has been rolled out last year, and it's there. The intensity regulation for electricity is in draft form, as I understand.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of resistance,
Pushback,
right? And it might be counterproductive to promote it a lot because it will wake up also the wrong people to push against it. But I hope that we will see this very soon.
Yep.
To be more details around it and put it in place. I don't know, maybe end of this year we'll see more. Look out for a regulation that regulates how greenhouse gas intensive electricity in Canada is allowed to be.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah, I don't know anything about this other than maybe one article I read in Common Ground 5 years ago, but the dismantling of BC Hydro was really, really bad, it seemed like. Like we had this, BC Hydro was like providing electricity to all of BC, and then it privatized and sold its assets to Terracing Gas or somebody from the States, and now we're buying our electricity from an American company.
I'm not sure that's really what happened.
Okay, good. I've been worried about it since I read that thing.
No. The BC Hydro is still there, and they're still responsible for a lot of the power in this province.
Good.
But they don't decide these things.
Okay.
That's the beauty of this approach. So the elected officials, they decide, yes, in order to protect human lives, because the climate crisis is about human lives, in the same way that we make laws about how much chemicals are allowed to be in this or even in this microphone that are harmful to people, we regulate how much greenhouse gases can be associated with electricity. That's what we do. That's what the government is for. And we're taking our responsibility. And that's the basis. And I wish every single climate march would like enforce that and say we need a responsible greenhouse gas intensity law for electricity and very high greenhouse gas intensive products like steel
that's a
and
really
concrete.
difficult sign for a kid to make.
I know
the sign I saw was like, bitch, we're gonna die, like that. I'm like, okay, I mean, I guess if that's what you're gonna say, but like, yeah, we need to be marching for the right
I have one more for that. I really have a funny story for you for the sign.
Yes,
because it's really good that you did mention it. Because I gave I did an event in a German city called Greifswald. At the university together with Fridays for Future. And I explained exactly all these things. And they were completely flabbergasted and said, like, really? Wow, we really should. That sounds like incredible. That would be such an almost easy solution to a lot of problems that we would. And so one of the participants in this meeting, she actually draw a sign. We need a greenhouse gas intensity. And she marched with it and she put it in her kind of activist bag.
Sure.
That's part one. Nothing remarkable, other than she actually wrote a sign. So it's possible to write a sign like this.
Okay, good.
But the really interesting part is that she then, the next day, did a tour. So she went to Berlin, which is a bit further south from where the city is. And she was part of a visiting tour of the German parliament, the Bundestag. And she still had that sign in her bag. Nice. And then she went to security, and then the person took out the sign, and this person was stunned. Like I wasn't there. She told me this guy was stunned, didn't know what to do, and he confiscated it.
Oh, man.
And because it was like a security threat, he thought.
Wow.
Now you know how potent this sign is.
It's the real deal.
This is a true story.
Yes.
And so they confiscated it. But the best part is usually when this happens, because there are other things, you may have nail clippers or whatever, you know, they just put it on the side and say, like, you get it back when you come back.
Yep.
But guess what? When she came back, the sign had gone.
Wow.
And she had to inquire, saying, like, this is my property. Like, you cannot just make it. And apparently they had some kind of special security room where this sign ended up. Wow. And she had to spend 3 hours negotiating with them before she got her sign back.
Wow. So that's just showing you how
Exactly. It shows you that this sign can,
Yes.
can be amazing. And even the security people in the parliament realize that this is like dynamite.
That's incredible. That's nuts. Well, I mean, I feel a lot better about Canada right now. I got to tell you that much. That's, and pertaining to like the first thing we were talking about, a lot of people, I think on a personal level, if someone says, I'm getting an electric car and the person goes, that'll never work. That'll never work person has just tapped out on like the world's problems are too big to solve.
Yes.
And I'm never going to be a part of the solution because I like hamburgers and I like meat and I like driving my Chevy truck and like, so just leave me alone. But I don't think we're that far off. I don't think that person would be like, oh, hey, don't cap the energy for producing gas. They'd be like, I don't care, do whatever you got to do. Like,
Yeah, but that's I'm absolutely happy that you say that, because that's the beauty of this approach.
It's
because
amazing.
if you think climate change is going to be halted if we all do the right thing,
right.
that's not very realistic. We're never going to solve this because not everybody will agree with that.
Yeah.
But if you say, wow, government should do their job and protect us all, which is usually what they do anyways,
Right.
and not everybody has to become an expert on greenhouse gases, then you go like, wow, that sounds a much more realistic way of doing this.
Well, also we've just had 8 years or 10 years of people just losing complete faith in the government. But the thing is that 90% of what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, the lights are going, right? The green, yellow, red, like they're working. The roads don't have huge holes in them. The lights are on, the garbage is getting collected. Like we've got a lot of stuff that the government is actually doing as a general thing, but we feel like they're just sitting there smoking weed and hanging out. I don't know, or meeting with fat cats and miners and cooking $1 billion deals and lining their pockets. But that's not what's going on in Canada, at least, and probably not all around the world. There's probably a lot of...
There are places where this happens, and that's unfortunate for the people who live there.
Yeah.
But in a lot of places, that's not the case. No, they're actually taking care of that. We have a relatively comfortable life.
Yes. Yeah. Right. That's absolutely right. Like the buses run and the traffic goes and you go to your job and you get your paycheck and you buy your things, which are also kept safe by Food and Drug Administrations and government agencies, making sure that you're not getting, marshmallows from Myanmar that have, poisonous dye in them or whatever. Yeah. That's cool.
Like, people, draw your sign.
Yes.
GHG intensity regulations is what you want.
I love it. That's awesome. So you're focused on one part of a fairly large, complicated problem puzzle, right?
You can say that, yeah.
How did you decide on this part of the problem to focus on?
It took me quite some time, actually, to be honest with you. And as I said, I come from the environmental conservation. So when I was going to school, for example, I was sitting in my biology class and was listening about, ecosystem is going to get destroyed and whatever. Going, whoa, wow, that's scary. Let's write this down on my nice white bleached paper. And I'm going like, maybe there is like...
That was me in high school. They were saying over the announcement system, we're meeting, the environmental protection group is meeting in the cafeteria. And then I went and I saw they got stacks of paper. We're going to photocopy this and hand this out. And I'm just going... I had that exact moment going, I think you're just trying to get girls. Like, I think that's what you're doing right now. You're inviting girls to be a part of a thing that shows that you're like worried about the environment, which you don't care about, or you wouldn't be doing this way. So yeah, you were in school, you see this and you think, okay.
And so what I did was I formed a small cooperative for 100% recyclable paper, being accessible to students.
Nice.
So I started my activism pretty early, and I did lots of those stuff. And then I worked a while in business where I couldn't do these things. And I thought, like, well, this is really crazy. Like, you should go back to what is important to you.
Right.
But I didn't know at the beginning what that was. So it took me quite a long time to figure out. And that in 2000, when I started to change a lot of things, there was no such thing as greenhouse gas accounting. I only knew that there was a problem.
Right.
And at that time, actually, I went to an investor and said, hey, wouldn't it be a good idea if there would be a service company that does deals with greenhouse gases, but not in the sense of selling carbon credits and all that stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I was just really like offering some kind of service that deal with this, because this is like a growing problem and industry will be interested in. And in 2000, all these investors that laughed me out of their office. They were going like, okay, just repeat this again. You want me to invest in a company that deals with hot air? So of course, like that.
Oh, wow.
So of course, like, it's like, okay, wow, good, okay, fine, that's what you think. And so they basically laughed me out of their office. And it took me a while to understand, okay, I think there's something there. And then when in 2005 it started, the greenhouse gas accounting was developed from the Canadian Senate Institute, and they offered courses. And then I was getting into it. I'm really, yeah, this is getting somewhere. I think that's the way to do it. And when we go back to what I explained about these rules and principles, what I believe in as a good solution, it matched 100% with that. I said, okay, this is how these things now suddenly, what I wanted to do and what is there, these things come together. And then eventually that's how I somehow went into this angle. The funny thing is, like last year, so 22 years after, I had like last summer, a lot of investment companies out of Toronto bug me because they wanted to buy our company.
Of course.
So 22 years, like they were 20 years behind. It was like 20 years ago, I was asking for money. I'm done. I don't need your money anymore, and I don't want to be bought anymore.
Right. Yeah. So it's not. This isn't like a business, like a money-driven business. This is a principle-based thing that you had a passion for before it even existed. You're like watching, going, well, when is someone going to do this?
But I must say, since I formed this company, Greenhouse Gas Accounting Services, in 2009, very quickly it became a collaborative aspect.
Cool.
So not all of this I developed by myself.
Right, of course.
There was a team, and everybody in the team contributed to this.
Yeah.
And that's where the really good ideas come from. They don't come from me. They come from interacting, from dialogue, everybody being able to voice their opinion and thinking, well, I don't think that makes sense. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening to you, versus a company that's for money oriented. It's like, does it make us money? No? Okay, shut up.
Right.
And then you don't find good solutions.
Yeah, the money thing just cuts people off at the knees. You can't move forward with a money company because you're stuck. You have to make money. Like you're just stuck. Yes. It's really one of the things that is, and that's going back to what you said. If you go to businesses to say, we've got to solve this plastic problem, they're going to come up with a solution that makes them money.
That makes them more money.
Way more money.
Yes.
They're never going to come up with a solution that costs them money and actually solves the problem. They're just not incentivized. Money doesn't incentivize people to act responsibly in the environment.
Usually not, no.
Typically not.
But I want to emphasize, so it's not, so I put some ingredients together, but it was really then, and I have to give credit to every single everybody in the team to contribute on an everyday basis to making this thing better.
Right.
And that's what really drives of coming up with good solutions.
And like what I was saying too, with even like, I mean, I was in high school 35 years ago, and people were creating an environmental protection group because generally speaking, everybody has been scared for so long about like, hey, what the hell are we doing? But as soon as you get a group of people together, you realize, holy crap, we can't really do anything because we're stuck in this market that's giving us products in, we're not using, I remember reading a book by David Suzuki 25 years ago where he's like, we just have to emulate nature. There's no end product in nature. Everything is a part of a system that there's no dumps. You don't wind up with a dump.
I mean, it's your circular economy, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seemed like, okay, that's great. So now how do we do it? Well, I can't do it as an individual. It's really, really difficult because I'm inside a bigger system. But yeah, like you keep saying, if you can affect change at the government level, then you've really affected real change.
But that's what you have to do as a group. So,
yes.
So to answer my other question, so what is it that you can do as an individual to really, it is educate yourself about these greenhouse gas intensity laws. Maybe there are better solutions. And while you're educating yourself, you find better solutions.
Cool.
But if you think it's a good solution, get active.
Yeah.
Talk to your MLA or to other people in politics or whatever and say, hey, there's one topic that you need to address. And the way to address it is to regulate it in a way that protects human lives.
Right.
And speak out about it. Discuss this idea. That's what you can do.
Right.
Because otherwise you're stuck in this individual view. And I know there's quite a number of young people that feel quite disillusioned with the news.
Absolutely.
And if you are already very concerned about this topic, and then on top of that, you have that concept of sinnership.
Yeah.
That makes something bad even worse, because that person thinks like, oh, we're going to have a catastrophe. And, oh, I'm going to eat some meat now. It's also my fault. This is like psychological disaster.
Absolutely.
Maybe even worse. Versus saying, okay, I'm concerned about this topic. What is that I can do? Where can I make a real difference?
Right.
I can have smart laws that prevent excessive amount of greenhouse gases going forward. And I can get active. And speak out about it, educate myself, and work on it. Yeah,
that big problem. I heard in a statistic that I don't know where it came from, but that 80% of adults in the developed countries, in the developed world, 80% feel that we have an impending climate crisis that will end the world as we know it in 12 years. That 80% of people are walking around going, we got like 12 years left before giant flood, meteor hit, like what we're
maybe
doing.
Not the media, but yes, but they are not that far off. We have to be honest. Like the changes that we're going to see in the next 10, 15 years are pretty radical, and they are going to cost human lives.
Okay.
So this is not fear-mongering. This is based on science.
Yeah.
The changes are going to be pretty drastic, and they are going to impede on human lives and our lives as we know it.
So you've talked about the individual level. You've talked about the governmental level. The in-between this is another thing that I'd like to pick your brain about. I've got, one of the sponsors is a snowboard company. Another sponsor is a boot company. These are companies that are environmentally, they want to do the right thing environmentally. Yes. How do they get involved in this carbon credit program and figuring out what they're, if they can buy offsets or if they can, how do they get involved at, like at a small company level, say like a 10 or 20 employee level?
No, that's a good question. So for an organization like this, I would recommend to do a greenhouse gas inventory based on the ISO standard, which Made in Canada solution.
Yes.
And understand, so where do the corporate greenhouse gases come from? What that means is that you orient yourself on control.
Yep.
So that means that you look at what do I pay for? Like what kind of energy do I buy? What kind of other fossil fuels I buy? Or maybe I use fossil fuels for some of the ingredients on my product.
Yep.
So that I have a bit of look on those things and ideally quantify it. Then I have a subject matter and fact-based thing that I can make decisions on. Say, wow, like most of our emissions come from, from our use of natural gas or something. Then I can say, okay, well, maybe I can change that and switch to renewable natural gas. Yes, it's more expensive, but that will significantly lower my footprint. Or I can electrify some of my machinery, or maybe some of the, I assume you use like foils and stuff to glue things together. And
there's glues and fiberglass and
whatever.
plastics.
So maybe there's heat required, and maybe there is machinery that uses electricity rather than natural gas.
Absolutely, sure.
And that would be an option. And then if you look at the materials you use, ideally, if you can use post-consumer content, ideally, then that will be good, like to contribute to the circular economy.
So these guys, is there someone they can just call and say, can you do an accounting for my business?
Yeah, one of our consultants who sits over there. They can also call me.
Yeah, perfect. Right.
That's what we do.
So that's something that your company offers, which I think, anyone watching this that is a part of an organization that we haven't talked about it, like greenwashing versus actually freaking doing something, right? Like there's a lot of greenwashing out there in the marketing of companies.
But I didn't answer your question about the offset. So if you
Yes.
are, even if you do make these changes, there will be still some greenhouse gases that will be associated to the company and your activities.
Right.
And that's how it is. And then the question is, okay, what do I do with those? Do I count of those or do I offset them? And I would say, like, that's fine as long as you're making an effort to control all the ones that you can control and focus on that.
Yep.
While a lot of companies go, oh, that's by offsets. No, let's just reduce your emissions first.
Right.
Because that already costs a lot of money, maybe new machinery, and it's much more effective because if you change your machinery to electricity, that will last forever.
Yeah.
Versus if you just buy offsets this year, maybe next year you'll forget to buy them. It didn't really make much of a difference.
Right. Because sometimes you're looking at it from the point of view of like, hey, we want to have that carbon neutral check mark, but then it didn't increase sales and it costs us a bunch of money. But like you're saying, if you're going like, hey, no, the problem is climate change. And we want to do the best thing we could do to affect, to make our company better.
And then I would say, and now this is now business advice. I mean, I've been also a business person. So is that you kind of like think about, okay, what can we do in this offset space to maybe support a community group that also reduces emissions?
Right.
I don't know, maybe there is a kindergarten or a community center, whatever. They don't have the money to, for example, electrify or something. And maybe we contribute to this and say, well, can we claim the offsets from that?
Got it.
As an offset? Because again, it's permanent. Once you electrify that community center, you can claim you made a real difference.
Right.
And these are the real credible offsets.
Cool.
And we actually happen to have an instrument to support those kind of community events.
Yeah.
It's called the localcarbonregistry.org.
Very cool.
And their community groups can go and represent their projects and list the emission reductions that they have achieved for just a small token amount of money and allow them to have real credible offsets versus just buying offsets off the shelf like retail going, I have no clue where they come from, but I have this tick mark. Right. Versus you have a real engagement, you engage in your community, or I don't know, if you're a snowboarding company, maybe you can reforest an area where you go snowboarding or whatever nearby and make sure that the carbon storage in that area is protected or something. So something meaningful,
right? Where
you also feel, okay, wow, I actually understand, I connect the dots. It's not just a piece of paper, but actually, wow, I can go to the community center, but it's electrified, cool. They must have a lower footprint.
Yeah.
Or you snowboard through an area, go, wow, hey, that forest, that looks actually very healthy. Well, how come? That's cool. You did it. And those things are important. We realize we are like central people. So making a difference that you can see will make other people see it as too.
Yeah.
And that will have an impact.
Yep.
Versus just having this tick mark or this logo on your website. It doesn't really do a lot.
Right. Yeah. So you're actually trying to get people that are doing it because they're being active in a solution as opposed to the greenwashing thing that you're talking about.
Yes.
So because there's a lot of greenwashing in everything, and I see it in the snowboard community for sure. Making claims about, we're carbon neutral or that there's no law against saying that you're doing that, right? And then the accounting, you can just do your own accounting and say like, we used to use these horrible glues and now we use these less.
But I mean, but I want to be careful. Not everything that people or companies do necessarily is greenwashing. I'm sure there's also companies that do the thing, but I would encourage them to not go for the label, but try to understand, okay, actually we changed something. Let's try to understand actually how much greenhouse gases really have been reduced. Because if you do this, another snowboarding company or another company will see that, okay, wow, that's actually impressive. That actually they got reduced by 100 tons or whatever, by 1,000 tons.
Yeah.
And then they will do the same thing.
Right.
But they will only do it if it seems credible.
Right.
They will not do it if you just do it for the label. At least that's my belief.
I agree with you. I think that people run their filter of authenticity They can see when something's just greenwashing, and they can see when somebody's actually making a concerted effort to, like, hey, we want to run a company, but we also don't want to damage the planet.
Yes.
That's like really important to us, as opposed to the tick mark thing. Oh, that's awesome. I think it's incredible what it was really inspiring for me to hear that you were working within these scientific Canadian guidelines. I was like, I'm glad that we have those things, but I had no idea that we're,
world leaders.
World leaders. That's crazy. That's awesome. That's amazing.
By a long shot.
Yeah. So let's say, just for the sake of the show, I got 56% of the people are from the States. If you're a U.S. company and you want to participate in this program, you can do it, right? Like you can.
Of course, the greenhouse gas accounting standard, ISO 14060-1, is an international standard, and the American Standard Institute will have the same standard. They also offer courses in greenhouse gas accounting.
Cool.
Same way as the Canadian one.
Rad.
It's exactly the same ones.
Yep.
And there are also other service providers than us that offer the service, as long as you ask for the right thing.
Yeah. So say it again.
So you want to get your corporate greenhouse gas inventory based on the ISO standard 14064-1.
So ISO, like the thing that's on everything that's keeping us safe.
ISO, like International Standard Organization.
Yes. That's an international.
It's an international standard, but it was developed in Canada originally. It's a made in Canada solution.
That's incredible. That's so awesome. Svend, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time from your day to explain this stuff in very straightforward terms, and maybe dispel a few myths out there. And hopefully the next time, one of the listeners is, tempted to be like, it's never going to work. They're at a meeting with their company owners saying, hey, this is a thing that we should be doing. Why not?
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. FNRad shoutouts this week to my daughter Emma, Svend, and all the good folks at GHG Accounting. Thanks for making this interview possible. You can contact GHG Accounting to inquire about having your business's greenhouse gas accounting done by professionals using the industry's agreed upon best practices. Thanks to all you listeners who listened right to the end, and be sure to come back next week for the final episode of Season 8 of the FNRad Snowboard Podcast, presented by Vans and brought to you by FNRad Snowboarding.